Contrary to what the mainstream media will tell you, game reviewers aren't just people playing video games giving their opinion on video games. The whole point of a reviewer is that they are reviewing a game for a specific audience. This suggests that if you are a reviewer making reviews for a video game, you have to be connected to the audience that is meant to consume your reviews. Your reviews, after all, is going to be the difference between them buying the game or them not buying the game. In the year 2025, the game reviewer of the mainstream media has basically become one of the most disconnected individuals in the gaming scene. Time after time, these journalists will give 9 out of 10s and 10 out of 10s to games that fail, that flop, that do not manage to spark the interest of the very audience that they are meant to be reviewing for. All of this leads us to our story today, and the story starts with Death Stranding. Now, Death Stranding 1 came out in 2020, July to be specific, and it was during the COVID era, and it let a lot of us sort of scratch our heads going, whoa, did he know? Did Hideo Kojima know that this was coming? Because the game is about this fractured world that needs to be reconnected, and it has very, very staunch and sometimes very harsh criticisms of the social media landscape and people being connected not by actual physical contact, but rather through the system and the problems that come with the system. The problem with Death Stranding was its initial sort of response wasn't great. Not because it was a bad game. In fact, I would go so far as to say Death Stranding 1 was an absolute masterpiece, but really because no one knew what it was. No one knew what to expect. It really is one of the most unique games out there. In fact, I don't think there is another game that can even come close to what Death Stranding 1 is, but it took some time for the player base to adapt, to figure out that, oh, wait, this is actually super fun. And then, as you can imagine, when Death Stranding 2 was announced, players were rightfully very, very excited.
Woo! Yeah!
The more we learned, the more we realized we really want this. Of course, Hideo Kojima himself wasn't all that happy with the playtesters and their responses to Death Stranding 2. Since Death Stranding 1, playtesters absolutely hated it, and Kojima was like, yep, that makes sense. But now with 2, playtesters loved it. And Hideo Kojima was like, what? So he actually made a number of changes to the game to make it less something that playtesters would like, because he ultimately believes that that is part of what made Death Stranding 1 so successful. Fundamentally, he kind of failed because, as you already know, Death Stranding 2 has been reviewed phenomenally well. And while there is definitely a problem with reviewers in the modern era, this time around, I think we can all say we're super excited for it, and it's probably not a bad thing. What is a bad thing and what starts to stand out is when you realize that there is one company that decided to do something completely different, and that is the people over at GameSpot. GameSpot and their review gave Death Stranding a 7. Now, 7 for the games media, for those of you that aren't aware, is basically the lowest that they will ever give a massive AAA studio because they don't want to, lose all of their advertising.
Nice job, team.
Now, when you read through the actual review, it's pretty good, right? Everything they say is pretty good. The guy explains everything about the game and the elements of the game, and it all sounds really, really good. Some of the parts that he seems to dislike a little bit, he doesn't like that you can use so many guns. That seems to be a huge problem for him. Another thing that he dislikes is that the sequel doesn't allow for you to spend a lot of time without all the tech upgrades. And you sort of get the tech upgrades like the exoskeleton and the vehicles very, very soon after you start playing, which, to the credit of Hideo Kojima, makes sense. Only a game reviewer working for the modern day legacy media could even come up with such a complaint. This is a sequel. It would be pretty awkward and weird if I start the sequel, which is a sequel, not a prequel, and I suddenly don't have access to all of my tech. What happened to it? Why must I again go 10, 20 hours before I can actually unlock all of the tech that I literally used not that long ago, at least in terms of what the game is like? So it kind of makes sense, right? From a game mechanic, from a realistic perspective, this makes sense. You don't have to use the tech, by the way. You can play the game without all of the tech if you really want the challenge, but they wanted to complain about something.
Nice job, team.
Of course, that's not actually why he downvoted the game. No, he downvoted the game. He dinged it down to a 7 because of this. This obsession with honoring past legacy also carries the baggage of some of the series' worst tropes, particularly around the portrayal of women, which the first game was also guilty of. In this, he speaks about how some of the scenes makes women out to be cutesy and liking to take pictures or love taking off their shoes, which anyone who actually knows women will know that that is all perfectly true. Of course, if you look like this, which is the man in question, his name is Diego Nicolas Arguello, or however the hell you want to pronounce his name. If you look at all of his social media, by the way, it's all protected. It went protected shortly after this review landed. In other words, he knew that he had just stepped into an absolute hornet's nest.
Girl, you have done it again.
Of course, he has him in his profile, so that should tell you everything you need to know about this individual. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly the problem. You have reviewers like Diego here who are in no way, shape, or form connected to the audience that they're reviewing for. Most of us don't hate women. Most of us don't believe, and this, by the way, is one of his problems, women getting pregnant, which is apparently not a good thing. But most of us know that it is women that get pregnant. Even though the year is 2025 and there's a bunch of retards that seem to think that men can also get pregnant, and I'm sure Diego would just love to be one of those men who carry a baby.
Yeah!
Fundamentally, most of us know that Diego cannot carry a baby, but of course, Diego wants to, and therefore Diego will ding the game 3 points because the game seems to play into some tropes that Diego desperately disagrees with. This is the quintessential example of modern day writers inserting themselves into pieces where they do not belong. You are a games reviewer. Your job is to review games for an audience. In order to do that, you have to figure out what this audience cares about and what this audience does not. In this case, the audience doesn't care that women tend to like taking selfies or like taking off their shoes. I, to this day, do not know a single woman that has not arrived at my house to hang out who doesn't immediately take off their shoes within like the first 5 minutes of arriving at my house. It just seems to be a thing that girls like to do. So the trope seems to check out. This man wants a more modern audience approach to women, and for that, the game had to get dinged 3 points. We do not hate the games media anywhere near enough, and fundamentally, these people cannot die any sooner. They are a blight on the gaming industry. They're a blight to gaming in general, and they are the bane of the existence of gamers everywhere. As always, hit the like if you liked, the dislike if you didn't, and I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.